March 8, 2025, Eastern Mediterranean Sea, 02:15 hours. The USS Gerald R. Ford sits 87 nautical miles off the Syrian coast, her massive silhouette lit by the glow of afterburners as another FA-18 Super Hornet slams off the deck. Flight operations have been continuous for 9 hours, launch cycles every 2 minutes, recovery operations every 4. She's predictable, she's exposed, she's moving at barely 12 knots, slower than a recreational yacht. To the intelligence officers monitoring her from Damascus, from Tehran, from Moscow's satellite coordination centers, this looks like America's arrogance made tangible. $13 billion floating in a kill box. The newest, most sophisticated warship ever constructed, positioned precisely where advanced anti-ship missiles can reach her. Russian analysts have calculated the engagement geometry 100 times. Syria's coastal defense batteries are armed with P-800 Onyx supersonic cruise missiles with a published range of 300 kilometers. Do the math. 300 kilometers equals 162 nautical miles. The Ford is sitting at 87 miles. She's not just inside the threat envelope, she's centered in it. Iranian drone operators are feeding real-time targeting coordinates to Syrian fire control systems. Chinese military observers are taking notes for their own carrier-killing doctrine. Every adversary with access to a radar screen is watching America's newest symbol of naval dominance operate in what should be a suicide position. They're calculating probabilities, they're wargaming scenarios. They're convincing themselves that one well-timed salvo could change the balance of power in the Mediterranean. But they're making a catastrophic error. They're solving the wrong equation. They're looking at the queen on the chessboard and missing the 20 pieces protecting her. Today on Navy Dissected, we prove why the most exposed carrier in the battle space is actually operating inside the most lethal defensive architecture ever constructed. Let's run the numbers. At 87 nautical miles from a hostile coastline bristling with advanced anti-ship missiles, the Gerald R. Ford is mathematically inside multiple overlapping threat rings. Start with the P-800 Onyx, NATO designation SSN 26 Strobile. This isn't Cold War technology. This is a Mach 2.5 sea-skimming cruise missile that flies 10 meters above the wave tops, using terrain masking and active radar homing to close on its target. Maximum range of 300 kilometers means every coastal battery from Latakia to Tartus can reach the Ford's current position with flight time to spare. The missile weighs 3,900 kilograms at launch, carries a 250-kilogram high-explosive warhead, and in terminal phase drops to 5 meters above the water, making radar detection nearly impossible until the final 30 seconds. Flight time from launch to impact at 87 miles is approximately 4 minutes and 20 seconds. The Ford's maximum emergency sprint speed is 30+ knots, which translates to roughly 35 miles per hour. In 4 minutes, she can reposition exactly 2 nautical miles. You cannot outrun Mach 2.5. Physics doesn't negotiate, and the cost mathematics appear even more damning. Each P-800 Onyx costs approximately $8 million on the international arms market. Syria acquired them through Russian military assistance packages, so actual cost to Damascus is effectively zero. Compare that $8 million missile to the $13 billion target, and you're looking at a cost-exchange ratio of 0.06%. For less than 0.1% of the carrier's construction cost, a hostile nation could theoretically eliminate America's most powerful power projection platform from the strategic equation. Syrian commanders have run these simulations in training facilities outside homes. Russian advisors have walked them through the engagement sequences. Iranian observers have provided satellite imagery showing the Ford's predictable patrol patterns. On paper, this looks like asymmetric warfare favoring the attacker. The carrier is large, slow, expensive, and exposed. The missile is small, fast, cheap, and plentiful. Every conventional military analysis suggests the defender is at a massive disadvantage. What none of these analysts understand is that they're not looking at a vulnerable target. They're looking at bait. The Ford isn't positioned at 87 miles despite the threat. She's positioned there because of it, because American naval doctrine doesn't avoid contested spaces. It defines them, controls them, and turns them into kill zones for anyone foolish enough to test the perimeter. Before any Syrian fire control officer even receives authorization to illuminate the Ford with targeting radar, before the P-800 Onyx leaves its coastal launcher, an invisible war has already been fought and won. At 240 miles to the west, an EA-18G Growler from Electronic Attack Squadron 141 has been flying an oval pattern at 28,000 feet for the past 8 hours. The pilot is fighting fatigue, sipping water through a tube connected to his flight suit, but the systems officer in the rear seat is wide awake, eyes locked on a bank of displays showing the entire electromagnetic spectrum across the eastern Mediterranean. Mounted on hardpoints under the Growler's wings, the ALQ-249. Next-generation jammer mid-band isn't just an electronic warfare tool, it's a perception weapon. It rewrites reality for enemy sensors. Here's the physics that makes conventional air defense obsolete. Traditional jamming from the 1980s and 1990s used brute force, broadcast massive amounts of radio frequency energy across wide frequency bands, essentially drowning out enemy radar with white noise. Effective in the moment, but crude. And critically, it announced your presence. Every radar operator within 500 miles knew exactly where you were because you were lighting up their screens like a stadium floodlight. The ALQ-249 operates on an entirely different principle. It uses active electronically scanned array technology combined with gallium nitride semiconductors to create something intelligence agencies call cognitive electronic warfare. When a Syrian early warning radar transmits a pulse searching for the carrier, that pulse has a unique signature. Specific frequency, pulse repetition interval, modulation pattern. It's a fingerprint. The Growler's system captures that pulse in microseconds, digitizes the waveform, analyzes every characteristic, and transmits back a modified return signal. Not noise, not interference. A lie that looks exactly like truth. The technique is range gate pull-off combined with velocity gate pull-off. The Syrian radar operator sees a return at 87 nautical miles, exactly where the Ford actually is. His screen shows solid contact, good signal strength, tracking steady. But 1 second later, the return shows the target drifting to 89 miles, then 93 miles, then 98 miles. His fire control computer is trying to generate a weapons lock, calculating lead angles and intercept geometry, but the target keeps sliding away on his display. Not because the Ford is maneuvering. The Ford hasn't changed course by a single degree. But the radar mathematics feeding his fire control solution are being rewritten in real time by a transmitter 240 miles away that he cannot detect. The operator doesn't know he's being deceived. His equipment shows green across the board. His radar is functioning normally. His signal processing is nominal, but the firing solution he's calculating is for a ship that doesn't exist at those coordinates. He's solving geometry for a ghost. By the time he realizes the deception, by the time his superiors order him to switch radar frequencies or change pulse patterns, the Growler has already adapted. The ALQ-249 doesn't just jam one frequency. It monitors and manipulates across the entire X-band and S-band spectrum simultaneously, adapting its deception in milliseconds. This isn't jamming. This is perception warfare. We don't block their sensors. We feed them false reality and let them make decisions based on lies. But suppose by some combination of luck and determination, a Syrian battery launches anyway. Suppose the Coastal Defense Commander decides to ripple fire 4 P-800 Onyx missiles in a saturation pattern, betting that even if the targeting data is corrupted, sheer volume will overcome American defenses. 4 missiles erupt from their launchers on the coast, rocket motors igniting, accelerating to Mach 2.5, dropping to wave-top height as they scream across the Mediterranean toward the Ford's last known position. Flight time 4 minutes 20 seconds. This is where conventional analysis says the carrier is finished. Surface-to-air missiles struggle with sea-skimming threats. The missiles are flying too low for long-range intercept. They're too fast for close-in weapons to reliably engage all 4 contacts. Every simulation run by adversaries suggests at least 2 missiles will penetrate the defensive envelope. They're wrong. 38 miles northeast of the Ford, the USS Vicksburg, a Ticonderoga-class guided missile cruiser, has been on station for 76 hours. Her AN/SPY-1D passive, electronically scanned array radar, a massive octagonal structure integrated into her superstructure, has been painting the Syrian coast continuously. The moment those P-800 motors ignite, the infrared bloom is detected by overhead satellites. The launch coordinates are transmitted via Link 16 tactical data network to every platform in the strike group. The Vicksburg's Aegis combat system doesn't wait for human authorization. Rules of engagement were pre-programmed before the Ford even entered the eastern Mediterranean. The vertical launch cells positioned forward of the bridge open with pneumatic hisses. 4 SM-6 missiles, 1 for each threat, erupt from their cells in 2-second intervals. This isn't the Navy's newest interceptor. It's the most versatile weapon in the arsenal. The SM-6 combines the airframe of the older SM-2 with the seeker from the AIM-120 air-to-air missile and adds an active radar homing system that changes the entire engagement dynamic. Here's why the physics favor the Defender. The P-800 is traveling at Mach 2.5, which is 1,912 miles per hour. Fast by missile standards, but it's locked into a ballistic trajectory. Once it commits to wave-top flight, it cannot maneuver vertically without losing aerodynamic stability. Yet the SM-6 launches from the Vicksburg and immediately climbs to 65,000 feet, accelerating past Mach 3.5, which is 2,685 miles per hour. It's not chasing the threat from behind. It's climbing above the flight path and diving down onto the target from a position of geometric advantage. At 60,000 feet, the SM-6's active radar seeker acquires the P-800. The intercept geometry is perfect. The SM-6 is diving at a 40-degree angle. The P-800 is flying straight and level 5 meters above the ocean. They're going to meet 93 miles from the Ford, with a combined closure rate exceeding Mach 6. When the SM-6's 140-pound blast fragmentation warhead detonates 12 feet from the P-800's fuselage, it doesn't need a direct hit. The warhead is surrounded by pre-formed tungsten fragments, each weighing 45 grams, and propelled outward at 8,000 feet per second. At Mach 2.5, the P-800's aluminum airframe has the structural integrity of wet cardboard against hypersonic tungsten. The missile doesn't explode dramatically, it disintegrates. The fuselage snaps in 4 places. The rocket motor separates from the guidance section. The warhead tumbles into the ocean and impacts the surface at 1,900 miles per hour, detonating on contact with water instead of target. 1 threat down, 3 remaining. And the engagement clock shows the entire intercept sequence took 47 seconds from launch detection to confirmed kill. This is cooperative engagement capability. One ship's radar guides another ship's missiles. The Vicksburg doesn't just defend herself. She defends the entire strike group as a networked system operating at the speed of light. 22,000 feet above the formation, an E-2D Advanced Hawkeye from Carrier Airborne Early Warning Squadron 125 has been orbiting for 3 hours. The crew of 5, pilot, co-pilot, combat information center officer, air control officer, and radar operator, are tracking every airborne contact within 350 miles. The AN/APY-9 radar, mounted in the 24-foot rotating dome above the fuselage, isn't just watching the remaining 3 P-800 missiles. It's coordinating the entire battle space. Every radar return, every infrared signature, every electronic emission from hostile forces is fused into a single integrated air picture and transmitted in real time to every platform in the strike group via the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network. The Ford's air wing isn't just responding to threats, it's anticipating them. What 4 FA-18E Super Hornets from Strike Fighter Squadron 87 have been flying Combat Air Patrol 140 miles east of the carrier. They've been holding station, apparently oblivious to the coastal missile launch, but their AN/APG-79 active electronically scanned array radars have been tracking those P-800s since motor ignition. Each Super Hornet carries 4 AIM-120D air-to-air missiles underwing. When the E-2D transmits updated engagement priorities, 2 of the Super Hornets break formation and accelerate to Mach 1.3, angling toward an intercept geometry that puts them 30 miles ahead of the incoming sea-skimming threats. Here's the tactical innovation that changes surface warfare. Air-to-air missiles aren't just for shooting down aircraft anymore. The AIM-120D has a range exceeding 100 miles and a terminal speed of Mach 4. Its active radar seeker can lock onto any target with a sufficient radar cross-section, including cruise missiles. At 70 miles from the Ford, the lead Super Hornet achieves radar lock on 2 of the remaining P-800s. The pilot doesn't ask permission. Rules of engagement are clear. He triggers 2 AIM-1 2 OHO-DS in a ripple launch, spacing them 4 seconds apart. The missiles drop from the weapons pylons, rocket motors ignite, and they accelerate away from the fighter at speeds the P-800 cannot match. This is pursuit geometry working in reverse. The AIM-120D is fired from a platform traveling Mach 1.3 in the same direction as the target. The missile inherits that forward velocity, then adds its own propulsion. Relative to the P-800, the AIM-120D is approaching from behind at Mach 2.7, a 60-mile-per-hour speed advantage. The P-800's radar warning receiver screams an alert. The missile's automated defense system deploys chaff, dumps metallic strips into the slipstream, hoping to seduce the incoming seeker. It doesn't work. The AIM-120D's radar is frequency agile, meaning it changes transmission frequency multiple times per second, defeating chaff by distinguishing between metallic cloud and solid target. At impact, the AIM-120D's 40-pound blast fragmentation warhead detonates inside the P-800's exhaust plume, shredding the rocket nozzle and severing hydraulic lines. The P-800 loses guidance. Its control surfaces lock. The missile noses over and impacts the Mediterranean at 1,900 miles per hour, creating a geyser visible for 20 miles. 2 threats down, 1 missile remaining, and that final P-800, through sheer probability, he has survived the initial defensive layers. It's 62 miles from the Ford, still traveling at Mach 2.5, still locked onto the carrier's last known radar coordinates. Flight time to impact is now 90 seconds. This is the scenario that keeps naval planners awake. A leaker. A single missile that penetrates the outer defensive rings and commits to terminal attack. At 62 miles, the Ford's own defenses activate. This isn't about hope, this is about mathematics and reaction time. The Ford carries the evolved Sea Sparrow missile system, a point defense interceptor designed for exactly this scenario. Mounted in 2 launchers, 1 forward, 1 aft, the system provides 360-degree coverage against low-altitude threats. At 62 miles, the remaining P-800 is still below the Ford's radar horizon, hidden by the curvature of the Earth. But the E-2D Hawkeye has never lost contact. The moment the missile crosses 50 miles, it rises fractionally above the horizon, and the Ford's AN/SPY-3 multifunction radar, an advanced X-band active electronically scanned array, acquires solid track. The evolved Sea Sparrow launch cells open. Two missiles fire in sequence, screaming off the deck at Mach 4, climbing to 15,000 feet before tipping over into intercept trajectory. But suppose, through electronic warfare or evasive maneuvering, the P-800 defeats even these interceptors. Suppose it closes to 10 miles, terminal phase, committed to impact, radar seeker locked onto the Ford's massive superstructure. This is where physics becomes visceral. Mounted on the Ford's starboard side, 3 levels above the waterline, sits a phalanx close-in weapon system. At a 6-barrel 20mm Gatling gun capable of firing 4,500 rounds per minute. The radar dome above the gun mount tracks the incoming missile with millimeter precision. At 2 miles, the phalanx opens fire. The sound is indescribable, a mechanical scream like tearing metal amplified through stadium speakers. 75 rounds per second pour into the airspace between the ship and the missile. These aren't ordinary bullets. They're depleted uranium penetrators, subcaliber tungsten cores wrapped in aluminum sabots, each weighing 100 grams, traveling at 3,600 feet per second. The fire control computer doesn't aim at the missile. It calculates the intercept point in space and fills that volume with metal. The P-800, traveling at 1,900 miles per hour, it flies directly into a cloud of tungsten moving 2,450 miles per hour in the opposite direction. Combined closure velocity exceeds Mach 3.6. At that speed, tungsten doesn't puncture aluminum. It vaporizes it. The first penetrator shreds the missile's radar dome. The second and third tear through the guidance section, severing the control computer from the actuators. The 4th through 15th chew through the fuselage, fragmenting the high explosive warhead into 1,000 pieces. The P-800 doesn't explode. It comes apart in mid-air, tumbling fragments raining into the ocean 1,500 yards short of the carrier. Total engagement time from radar acquisition to confirmed kill, 11 seconds. 4 missiles launched, 4 missiles destroyed. And the Ford never stopped flight operations. Not for a single second. Because this isn't luck. Yet this is system architecture. We don't hope the defenses work. We engineer mathematical certainties into overlapping kill zones where every threat dies multiple times before it reaches the target. But now the question shifts from capability to justification. Why position $13 billion and 5,000 human beings where hostile forces can even attempt an attack? Why not stand off at 300 miles, beyond the range of any coastal defense system, and operate in perfect safety? The answer is written in blood and time. Specifically, the time it takes a human being to bleed to death, and the distance airborne assets must travel to prevent that outcome. The F-35C Lightning II, operating from the Ford's deck, has a combat radius of 670 nautical miles on internal fuel. Sounds like overwhelming margin. But combat radius is a peacetime planning figure that assumes optimal flight profile. No combat maneuvering, no time on station. Real-world operations are constrained by launch overhead, flight time, and the physiological limits of the human body. Launch preparation on a Ford-class carrier requires a minimum of 9 minutes from alert scramble to aircraft airborne. The F-35C must be moved from the hangar bay or parking spot to a catapult, connected to the electromagnetic aircraft launch system, full pre-flight checks completed, pilot strapped into the cockpit, canopy closed, final clearance from airboss, tension on the catapult, launch. 9 minutes is the absolute minimum with a hot aircraft and a ready pilot. At 87 miles offshore, an F-35C reaches hostile airspace over the Syrian coast in exactly 12 minutes at cruise speed of 450 knots. Total time from scramble alert to aircraft overhead, 21 minutes. Now compare that to a carrier positioned at 300 miles offshore, operating in what risk-averse analysts call a sanctuary position. Same 9-minute launch preparation, but flight time balloons to 40 minutes at cruise speed. Total response time, 49 minutes. That 28-minute difference isn't an inconvenience. It's the gap between surgical intervention and death. Because the critical variable isn't aircraft performance, it's human physiology. A Navy SEAL operating behind enemy lines takes a 7.62 millimeter round through the thigh, severing the femoral artery. But his heart is pumping 5 liters of blood through his circulatory system every minute. A severed femoral artery dumps blood at a rate of 500 milliliters per minute. He has approximately 12 minutes before he loses enough blood volume to enter hypovolemic shock. After shock onset, he has another 48 minutes before exsanguination causes cardiac arrest. Total window, 60 minutes. This is called the golden hour, and it's not a guideline. It's a physiological countdown. Trauma mortality rates are 98% survivable if the casualty reaches surgical care within 60 minutes. After 60 minutes, survival drops to 40%. After 90 minutes, it's 10%. 1 hour is the difference between a handshake at the reunion and a memorial service at Arlington. Now, subtract the overhead that cannot be compressed. Jet the MV-22 Osprey used for casualty evacuation needs 7 minutes to start engines, spin up rotors, and lift off from the Ford's deck. The medical team needs 5 minutes to receive the casualty, assess injuries, establish IV lines, and secure the patient for flight. The flight deck needs 3 minutes to clear the recovery area for the returning Osprey. That's 15 minutes of fixed overhead subtracted from the 60-minute golden hour window. You have 45 minutes of flight time available. An MV-22. Osprey cruises at 250 knots, which translates to 4.17 nautical miles per minute. Multiply 45 minutes by 4.17 miles per minute, and you calculate a maximum effective casualty evacuation radius of 187 miles. But combat doesn't occur in sterile planning environments. Add evasive maneuvering for hostile fire, add weather delays, add mechanical issues, add the margins required when lives are at stake, and the safe operating distance collapses. The Ford is positioned at 87 miles, not despite the threat, but because that distance guarantees the golden hour is preserved for every asset operating in the battle space. Not 86 miles, not 88 miles, exactly 87. And who's manning the Combat Information Center tracking those electromagnetic emissions that keep the electronic warfare systems one step ahead of enemy targeting radars? A 21-year-old from Ohio who enlisted because manufacturing jobs in his hometown disappeared. He's been standing watch for 6 hours. His feet hurt. His lower back aches. His eyes burn from staring at green phosphor displays. But his job tonight? Monitoring frequency deconfliction between the Growler's jamming pods and the Aegis radars, and ensuring friendly systems don't interfere with each other while simultaneously blinding the enemy, is the reason that SEAL with the femoral artery wound makes it back to the Ford's medical bay in 53 minutes instead of becoming a statistic. So how does the United States Navy position its most valuable strategic asset inside a missile engagement zone and operate with absolute confidence? Not through individual capabilities, through system architecture. The Ford is the visible element, the 1,092-foot flight deck launching and recovering 75 aircraft, projecting power across 700 miles of battle space. But she's never alone. The USS Vicksburg, the Ticonderoga-class cruiser, is the Guardian. Her AN/SPY-1D radar monitors 360 degrees of airspace simultaneously, tracking over 300 contacts, managing engagement priorities, launching interceptors with reaction times measured in seconds. Her vertical launch cells carry 96 missiles, a mix of SM-6 long-range interceptors, SM-2 medium-range missiles, Tomahawk land attack cruise missiles, and anti-submarine rockets. She's not a ship. She's a floating missile battery with enough firepower to suppress an entire nation's air defense network. 50 miles to the northwest, the USS Arleigh Burke, a Flight 2A destroyer, patrols the outer defensive ring. Her AN/SPY-1D radar overlaps with the Vicksburg's coverage, creating redundant sensor architecture. If one radar goes offline, the network adapts. If one ship is targeted, another assumes defensive responsibilities. The Arleigh Burke's magazine holds 96 additional missiles, doubling the strike group's defensive firepower. Below the surface, while invisible to satellite reconnaissance, the USS Virginia, a Block 4 attack submarine, has been on station for 108 hours. Silent running. Her Virginia payload tubes hold 40 Tomahawk cruise missiles, GPS coordinates pre-programmed for every Syrian and Iranian military installation within 1,000 miles. The submarine isn't defensive, it's retribution. If a hostile force fires on the carrier, those Tomahawks launch 17 minutes later. Not as retaliation, as elimination. Every coastal defense battery, every radar installation, every command bunker that participated in the attack is erased with 1,000-pound warheads arriving at 550 miles per hour. And coordinating this entire constellation of platforms, orbiting at 25,000 feet, is the E-2D Advanced Hawkeye. Its AN/APY-9 radar doesn't just detect targets, it manages the battle space. And every data point from every sensor, ship-mounted radars, airborne radars, satellite feeds, sonobuoys, SUA, electronic support measures, all of it fuses into a single integrated tactical picture. That picture is transmitted in real time via Link 16 to every platform in the strike group. The result is a combat network where every ship, every aircraft, every submarine sees the identical tactical picture simultaneously. The F-35C pilot doesn't just see his own radar returns. He sees the entire battle space rendered from the Hawkeye's perspective, projected directly onto his helmet-mounted display. Enemy aircraft 200 miles away appear as distinct symbols with speed, altitude, and heading vectors. Threats are prioritized by artificial intelligence running on the Hawkeye's mission computers. The destroyer captain doesn't command a single ship. He commands the collective firepower of the entire strike group. His vertical launch cells can fire missiles guided by radar data from the cruiser 40 miles away. The submarine can launch Tomahawks based on targeting data from an F-35 operating 150 miles inland. This is network-centric warfare. The Ford isn't a ship. She's a node in a distributed weapons system with a shared nervous system operating at light speed. Remove the Hawkeye, and the system loses its coordinating intelligence. Remove the cruiser, and the defensive magazine depth drops by half. Remove the submarine, and offensive strike options disappear. But with all pieces synchronized through the Cooperative Engagement Capability Network, you don't have a vulnerable carrier. You have a distributed superorganism with redundant sensors, overlapping kill zones, and reaction times faster than human decision cycles. Any enemy who targets the Ford isn't attacking a ship. They're triggering an automated response protocol that will destroy them before their own missiles reach intercept range. The USS Gerald R. Ford, that appeared catastrophically exposed at 87 miles offshore, has revealed itself as something else entirely. Not a target, a statement. Because when that Navy SEAL with the severed femoral artery regains consciousness in the Ford's state-of-the-art medical facility, when he sees the surgical team that stabilized him in 47 minutes from injury to operating table, when he eventually returns home to his family in Virginia Beach and watches his daughter graduate high school, it's because someone did the math correctly. Someone calculated that 87 nautical miles was the exact distance where defensive firepower and response time mathematics converge, where missile intercept geometry and casualty evacuation physics reach perfect equilibrium, where American technological advantage and hostile capability meet, and the advantage tilts decisively toward the defender. Not 86 miles where response time becomes unacceptable. Not 88 miles where risk increases unnecessarily. Exactly 87 miles, calculated to 3 decimal places, refined through war games and simulations, validated through decades of naval combat experience. And that 21-year-old radar operator from Ohio, The kid with aching feet and burning eyes after a 6-hour watch in the Combat Information Center, he doesn't know his shift tonight was part of a flawless defensive operation. He won't receive a medal. His name won't appear in intelligence briefings. His family will never know the specifics of what he did. But his job monitoring electromagnetic spectrum management, ensuring the Growler's jamming systems remained frequency deconflicted from friendly radars, maintaining the invisible electronic warfare bubble that made enemy targeting radars see ghosts instead of carriers, that was the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. American naval power doesn't originate from $13 billion supercarriers. It doesn't come from hypersonic missiles or stealth fighters or artificial intelligence. It comes from 21-year-old kids from Ohio executing electromagnetic warfare protocols perfectly under stress. The United States doesn't need to invade hostile coastlines to dominate strategic geography. We position a floating city 87 miles offshore, protected by physics, geometry, networked sensors, and sailors who treat impossible as a planning challenge, not a limitation. This isn't a demonstration of force. This is an applied physics examination. The variables have been solved. The equations balance. The watch continues. If this breakdown of defensive architecture and tactical geometry changed how you understand modern carrier operations, type architecture in the comments right now. And if you respect the engineering and the people executing it flawlessly under pressure, hit subscribe. We decode the systems that hold the line. This is Navy Dissected. The math is final. The watch stands.